Is this okay? Do I keep the headphones on the whole time or can I take them off? Because I can't hear myself talking. Will I be able to hear myself talk? Is that what you're saying?
All right.
We're already recording too, right, Brian?
Yeah, right now it's recording.
Lovely.
Okay,
Great.
do you hear yourself now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
There we go.
Great, cool. We record basically from entrance in. Just,
Got
you know.
it.
I like it because I like the energy of
candid
like
camera.
Yeah. Don't you think it gives it like a more energy when you like have the introduction?
Yeah,
into
because
something?
then you're like, oh, we're going to jump in. And then the person's probably like, oh my God, okay.
Yeah.
Like me.
Because it feels more like official and then tense and weird if you just like, now here we are beginning
It's starting,
right?
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, I'm here with my friend Talia. Talia and I met through my friend Mandee, who's producing my one-woman show. How do you know Mandee?
Mandee and I actually met when I was working as a personal trainer at Equinox. She was one of my clients, and later she ended up shooting my wedding, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And then we just became friends after that. And just, ever since then. So
Talia and I connected in my one-on-one show, I talk a lot about like eating disorders and just my history with them and how much they contributed to the low point in my life. And Talia connected with that. She knew exactly where it was coming from. And we had, I would say, pretty instant connection.
Yeah.
And we just started kind of spewing different, like, wait, this, do you know about this? What about this? What do you think about this? About eating disorder related stuff.
Yeah.
Then we got coffee and sort of the same thing happened. And I love our connection because I feel like it's really hard to find people who want to talk about eating disorder recovery the way that we're talking about it. I think it's an important thing to be talking about. And my life sort of went like I had my eating disorder friends and then I started recovery and those friends were not around anymore because most of them continued on with their eating disorders. And then my newer friends didn't necessarily understand the eating disorder history.
Yeah.
So there's just this huge missing piece to the friendship where, you know, eating disorders were a big part of my life and talking about recovery is, I think, useful and helpful and important in terms of like staying on top of recovery. So thank you for hanging out and doing this. And I'm so happy to be talking with you.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting. It's my first podcast.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so surprised.
You think people call me every day and they're like, hey, want to be on my podcast? No.
Well, because you have an eating disorder recovery channel on YouTube, yeah?
I do, yeah. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about eating disorder recovery, mental health, and intuitive eating. Which has been really, really healing, and it's been such an amazing experience. And I am in grad school to become a licensed marriage and family therapist so that I can ultimately help people with eating disorders and just in the recovery space be somebody who can spread awareness and just be a leader for that community.
I love that. So I thought that you were studying to be a, like eating disorder specialist therapist. That's not the case, or is that?
So my goal is to become an eating disorder therapist, but there are no like real programs for that, unfortunately. So I'm actually studying therapy and I'm studying to become a therapist and I'm studying psychology with a specialization in trauma. And then with that, you can go get like certifications such as intuitive eating, DBT, but it really does fall on you to get the experience that you want with whatever it is that you're looking to do. And for me, it happens to be eating disorders. So I really go out of my way to make sure that I am learning about them, treatments, and even with papers that I write where teachers give you like the freedom to write whatever you want. I always focus on eating disorders or just understanding the research behind it, the treatment, causes, trauma, all of that. I try to focus on like eating disorder specific work. But there really is no like eating disorder specific.
Why? I don't understand.
License. I honestly don't know. And I even talked to the head of the school when I first started because it's completely lacking. Why is there no eating disorder specialization? Why is there no like specific track for it. There's no class on it. There's no, like, there's nothing. There's one workshop that they offer, at least at my school. And I know that other schools are kind of like that.
Not cover it. This is
one like 5-hour workshop.
Yeah.
And I think that contributes to the stigma and the myth. And I honestly don't know what it is. I was talking to a friend yesterday about this.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't they doing this? I think it's because one, there's maybe confusion on like how to teach it.
Yeah.
You know, are we going to support the belief that an eating disorder is an addiction? Or are we going to talk about, you know, treating it with DBT or CBT or like what are we going to use and what are we going to promote as an institution? I think maybe they don't know which direction to go, or maybe it's that they don't feel like there's a demand for it, which I would argue that I
would say for sure
definitely is.
Jesus, yeah. When you say stigma or myth, what is it that you're specifically talking about? Is it just a multitude of things, or is there one particular eating disorder stigma that you feel like is the most prominent?
I think with eating disorder stigma that I'm talking about, it's like, you know, we live in a society that's obsessed with thinness.
Yeah.
And, you know, many people struggle with their bodies and their relationships with food without having an eating disorder. And that is something that could be put in the category of like eating disorder work and eating, like having an eating disorder track. Like we could talk more about thin privilege, diet culture. These terms are things that I think not a lot of people are aware of unless you're really in the recovery community and space.
Right.
And that's something that I've noticed because I'll even say things like that in class and people are like, well,
just blank stares.
Yeah, what is that? Or they'll talk about their diet or they'll talk about how they're restricting something. And I'm always the one that's like, wait a second here. Like, hold on, we need to talk about this. Like, this is actually a much larger topic.
Yeah.
Why aren't we talking about this? Why aren't we focusing on this? And, you know, people think that, oh, you either have an eating disorder or you don't. But especially in LA, it's like we have a lot of other things and other categories that fall under that, like disordered eating, just having a bad relationship with food, not being able to eat certain things, being restrictive around food, orthorexia. All of that's so normalized that maybe the school doesn't think that we need to have a specialization around just eating disorders when I think there's so many other things that fall under that category. You know?
So it's sort of that they just believe it's a blurry line and who's to say and that eating disorders are maybe difficult to they're kind of not easy to quantify.
Yeah, it's not black and white. I think that's what it falls, you know, what they would say. And I think eventually I do believe that most schools and institutions, you know, I think they will start to see this and see the demand for it. I think right now they just don't know how. They just don't know where to start. You know, what does the research say? It's still developing. DBT is something that I know is really important to you. And I've learned so much more about it myself. And it is something that is still being developed and people are just now learning about. And, you know, it was started for people who have BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. Dr. Marsha Linehan created it specifically for that. But now we've seen that it is actually so useful in the treatment of eating disorders.
Amazing.
Yeah. And other, all kinds of other disorders, really. So I think there's just a lack of, you know, I don't want to say research, but there is a lack of research and there's just a lack of like general knowledge.
Sure. I feel like we'll probably touch on a diet culture and thin privilege. So can you break those down a little bit just for people who might not know?
Yeah, absolutely. Diet culture is this idea that, you know, weight loss is good and that we live in a society, I touched on this a little bit, but we live in a society that really loves people who are thin, and people who are thin in our society get more
opportunities.
Opportunities, benefits. There's also this assumption that if you're thin, you're healthy. And thinness does not equate to health.
Oh my God.
But for some reason, we think, no. Thin is the ultimate privilege. I mean, you are pretty, you are successful, you have your life together if you're thin, you have good control, you can keep everything together. Like all of these.
A leader.
Yes. Yes. Like you'll start to see like all of these things equate to being thin and having this wonderful body. But I know a lot of thin people who are very unhealthy and a lot of people who are in larger bodies who are actually really healthy and have a much healthier relationship with food than somebody who is thin. And we put people who are thin up on a pedestal. It's like, especially in LA, it's like, oh my God, you are thin, you are everything. And diet culture goes along with that. And it's just living in this culture that is constantly pushing weight loss, thinness, trying a new diet, scaring you into like weight gain and all of these messages that basically promote thinness. And that there are certain foods that are good and bad, and that we should be labeling foods as such. And I would say that I can give you a really good example of diet culture.
Yeah.
I was driving by, I don't know if I could like name the restaurant, but I was driving by
Jack in the Box.
Okay. I was driving by, you could bleep it out, I guess, if you want, but Creation, which is like a very common, popular juice cleansing, whatever.
Trendy LA spot. You got your acai bowl, you got your morning sunshine
smoothie,
orange juice shot.
Yeah, you name it. And they had this neon sign outside of the store that said, "Eat, drink, shrink." And I was just like, did I read that right? Is that real? Like, it's just this idea that like anyone who walks through our doors, one, is trying to lose weight and is trying to shrink, and two is, you know, our foods promote weight loss and thinness.
Right.
Like that's diet culture right there. And if you're not aware of diet culture, if you start like acknowledging it and seeing it, you will see it everywhere. Everywhere, every day, you will see a message that is promoting being smaller and losing weight, and just, you know, you'll get that message somehow.
I'm so excited. There's so much to talk about here. But so I have complex thoughts on like society's contribution to eating disorders. It's real murky for me. Still trying to work through all of it. But to your point of like the eat, drink, shrink, and where it's very kind of, it's like very on the nose wrong, right? There's a lot of companies that are trying to do it right, and I have air quotes around that because it's still corporate controlled and very to sell product, right?
Oh yeah.
So I'm thinking of like Aerie. They did that. They got so much praise for doing that like underwear campaign. Yeah. It's like real bodies. You still had a fucking row of 10 thin women, very conventionally thin, beautiful, gorgeous women.
Yeah.
Wearing your so did you like, are we supposed to applaud you and buy your underwear now? Like, wow, what great strides is, I feel like, what you're supposed to be thinking, but it's so not that. Right?
Yeah. And then there's just one plus size woman in those types of campaigns, or like, it's just,
which is their version of like the diversity hire. It's like,
or like, I don't know. Or there's some sort of idea that like, if we're acknowledging diet culture and we're acknowledging thin privilege, we're promoting like obesity and like all these unhealthy things. I posted a video about diet culture and thin privilege, and I've never gotten so many dislikes before.
Why? Why?
I think it's just so controversial, and it's just such a touchy subject for people. And
what do they not like about it? I'm so confused. What do you think it is that they could be seeing in it?
I got comments that like, you're promoting obesity, being thin is better. Being thin means that you are healthy. Just comments like that. I think people just don't really understand the extent of like how thin privilege can be problematic. And like, there's nothing, like, I have thin privilege, you have thin privilege. Yeah. Like, I think we need to acknowledge that too. And I acknowledge that in the video. It's like, this is just like how our bodies are, and just like somebody in a larger body who, that's just how their body is. Genetically, they have a set point. There's a place that their body feels comfortable. That's where they want to be. We need to acknowledge these things a little bit more and see how, like, people in society are treated unfairly because of their body size and shape, when in reality, they might not have any control over that.
Right.
And we don't need to control that, you know? And that's what intuitive eating is there for.
To the point of like thin privilege, do you feel like there's also on the opposite side of that, I feel this sometimes, thin guilt? Like, so I have had, my body has had such a range of, I'm 5'2", but I've had such a range of weights at this height that my weight's fluctuated a lot because of my eating disorders, naturally.
Yeah.
And right now I'm thinner than I have been sometimes when I've been really in the thick of an eating disorder. And I think that's a difficult thing to maybe come to terms with myself. Like I've had... I published this article in Huffington Post about my history with eating disorders, and I struggled with it ahead of time because of knowing that my body is smaller than it has been at times when I've been struggling the most, and wondering if people would even understand that, or if people would just kind of write it off, or feel bad about themselves if they're struggling with an eating disorder because of that. And that's something that's like, I had to just accept, look, this is where my body is, and it does not diminish what the reality of my struggle was, and the fact that this is where my body has landed when I am being healthy and treating myself well is just the reality of the situation. And I think that I've learned a lot in the process, and it's more about sharing the process than it is about any sort of weight. Like, I was making it about the weight by, you know what I mean? Like, again, making it about the weight.
Yeah, just feeling like self-conscious about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm sure people... You probably even thought like, okay, well, what if the response is like, well, what do you know? Like, you don't know what it's like to be overweight. You don't know what it's like to...
gain 60 pounds in recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, I did gain a pretty significant amount of weight, about 20 to 30 pounds, and I'm 5'2" as well. So, to me, that was pretty significant. But at the same time, like, that's all relative. I don't know. To somebody else, that's nothing.
Right.
And the weight gain is really difficult, and it is hard. And you're right that there can be thin guilt, and you can feel really guilty about the way that your body is looking and how it shows up. And I think, again, like, to your point, I love that article, by the way, that you wrote.
Oh, thank you.
But I think to your point, it's like, again, like, you're making it about your body, and like, maybe it needs to be about a different conversation and like a different topic, and not just like what you look like and what your weight is and what your body looks like after recovery. And your weight continues to fluctuate as you get older, as things happen to you, different times shifts in your life.
Yeah.
It's like so normal. And I think for so long, I thought I had to only be one weight, and that was it. Like, for the rest of my life. And anything, below or above that. And by the way, I don't know how much I weigh because I just like stopped weighing myself after a certain point. But like, anything above or below that is, so awful. That's what I thought, like, oh my God, like, I have to be this exact weight at this height, and like for my BMI and like all these things. And it's so not true. I mean, our bodies are meant to fluctuate, especially as women. We have cycles, or anyone who has a cycle. It's like our weight fluctuates depending on what you eat, where you are, traveling, time of your life, events that happen to you, stress, getting older, having children. Like, there's so many factors and so many things that can affect that. And we should be talking about other things that surround that, not just the weight. Although I know weight gain is really scary.
Totally.
So
something that I really want to focus on for this is the dark side of recovery. But first, I think it would probably be helpful if you kind of can give us just like a history of your eating disorder history, and run down that as much as you're comfortable with.
Sure, yeah. I think my relationship with food was pretty normal until I was maybe like 12 or 13 when I started middle school, and things started changing as, they do in middle school.
Just natural. Nothing out of the ordinary, just...
No, I think I really wasn't fitting in with like the group of girls that I was around, and, things were changing and cliques were changing, and I kind of felt out of control. And just to give you a little background, like, my parents were immigrants, so they really didn't understand what I was going through, or like American culture. So that was really hard for me, and I didn't feel like I had anyone to really talk to about what I was going through. So I really just internalized my feelings, and I think I just wanted to feel in control of something. And I'd always been thin, so it wasn't really about my body at first. It was just like, I just want to
control.
I just want to control something. And when I was growing up, I don't know, I think we talked about this actually in our conversation before. There were a lot of pro eating disorder websites. And there were a lot of like blogs about, you know, do you want a buddy to go on a fast with for like a week or whatever? And people would post like these crazy skeletal like photos of themselves, thinspiration on these terrible pro eating disorder, pro anorexic websites. And I would follow them like religiously. And, you know, I would try the most bizarre things. And eventually, like, I just kept getting, like, better and better at it. And it became this, like, secret. And it was rewarding. And, like, I just became obsessed with the feeling of, like, starving. It just, it felt like I was conquering something. And, like, you know, at the end of the day, like, that I had that. It was mine. It was something that I can control and something that...
It's like mastery in something.
Yeah, I finally felt good about something.
Yeah.
And it was honestly a great distraction, too, from, like, the issues that I was having with, like, in school and, like, not being able to fit in. So, you know, when you're a child, you have very little control over your life. Your parents decide most everything for you. Yeah. Except for... you know, maybe your food choices or
maybe,
you know, your food choices or, you know, organization and cleaning. And like, that's why some people become very like OCD and have those types of fall under that category.
Did it have any immediate negative consequences or was it pretty much just reinforced by everything around you?
I don't think I had any negative consequences yet, no. And I really had this idea of, like, I could stop at any time. This is not a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and
I'll just keep it up as long as it works for me type thoughts.
And being, like, a child, it's like your brain's not even developed yet. So you have no idea. You can't understand the consequences of your actions. Had I known what kind of pain and misery it would have brought me, I mean... there's no way. Like, or if I was treated, if there was an intervention at some point. But I think in my case, like my eating disorder, because my parents didn't really understand it, it was left untreated for such a long time. And, you know, at first I started off with anorexia and then I started working out and became obsessed with the gym.
At what age was this? Probably
a little bit after like high school. Okay. And then throughout college, I really started struggling with binge eating, which go figure, like you restricting for so many years after.
Your body's just screaming.
Exactly. It's like, food. I just want to keep you alive. So I started struggling with that. And those were like the darkest years. And
the binge eating years.
Yeah.
Why do you think? Just because of?
Because I think I was finally getting older and I was starting to see like that it was consuming my entire life. It was becoming something that I was obsessing over to the point where it was really impairing my daily functioning.
Wow. Yep. I feel you there.
And things only got worse when my mom died when I was 21, 22. And I got into like the bodybuilding world, and that became something where I could kind of hide my eating disorder and mask it because, to be honest, in that community, it's normal to have this like very obsessive relationship with food and counting your macros and your calories and, you know, doing fasted cardio in the morning, lifting weights at night. Like that was a very normal community. And I surrounded myself with people like that and a coach who was, you know, giving me a diet plan that was like 800 calories or so.
And probably applauding you, complimenting you. When
oh my God, yeah. You know, my body fat was going down. I had to weigh myself every morning and every night. And just seeing those pounds come off, I was like, yes, finally, like I found my niche. And, you know, I was like, no, there's nothing wrong. And I just kept ignoring all the signs because I just wasn't ready to admit that I really had a problem. And I was so terrified of gaining weight and seeing what my body would look like after that I was like, I cannot possibly let go of this. I just can't.
Did a part of you know underneath, like, something's wrong? Or do you think that it was such a level of denial that you weren't even ready to accept that then at that point? Well, obviously you weren't ready to accept it, but I mean, you weren't even able to acknowledge it.
I think I was in such a, it's hard to even remember because I think I was in such a dissociative state because I never dealt with the grief of my mom passing.
Oh my God.
You know?
Relatable.
Yeah. And the trauma of all that, I just like never dealt with that. I never let that go. So I think I was definitely way more in denial. I knew that there was something wrong, but I just did not want to deal with it.
Shove it down.
I didn't want to deal with it, didn't want to face it. Yep. And I was almost in like a dissociative state where it was just like, I couldn't feel anything, you know? Nothing. No feelings. I wasn't happy. I couldn't feel sad. I couldn't cry. Just didn't feel anything at all. So...
just kind of numbed out.
Yeah, completely. And I kind of let things go like that for a couple of years.
Still doing the weightlifting.
Still doing the weightlifting, the bodybuilding stuff.
Were you training at this point?
No, not yet.
Okay.
No. And then from there, I went to law school for a year because I was like, you know, that's just what you do. Like in the Persian/Jewish community, it's like, do you go to, you go to law school or you go become a doctor? That's med school. Like those are your options.
Or you write comedy.
Yeah. That's kind of what my dad presented me with. And again, like, I think he just wanted me to be successful in life. And he thought that those careers would guarantee that. And that's what all his, and that's what all his friends' children, they were all doing that. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to med school. Let's try law school. Why not? And I was in a really toxic and pretty abusive relationship at this point. And
was that your first relationship?
Pretty much. Okay. Yeah. And that kind of, again, like put me in this position of, just going further and further down the hole. And so I continued with the eating disorder behaviors and started falling into, I would say, like orthorexia at this point.
Yeah.
With the binge eating, with the over-exercising, and then, with the pressures of going to law school and the toxic relationship, and then realizing, oh my God, like, what is my life? Like, what the fuck have I done with my life? Because this is like not at all what I wanted to do. And I have a horrible relationship with food. I just lost my mom. I'm in this terrible relationship. I'm going to law school. I don't care about law school at all. I don't want to be a lawyer. Like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
So all of that finally like caught up with me and I reached a breaking point.
You were 22?
At like 23, 24.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And the breaking point, all of these things at the same time, and you thought, it's time to change.
Something's got to change.
Something's got to give.
Yeah. And I met a wonderful guy at this point who is now my husband, but he was my boyfriend then.
Yeah.
And was like, on our second date, I remember he told me, you're not a lawyer. And I remember thinking like, excuse me? You never, like, you don't know me. You've just met me. Like, what are you saying? He's like, I don't think this is right. Like, I see behind that. You're not a lawyer.
Wow.
And
did you appreciate that? Were you like, okay.
I think I kind of did. Yeah. I think finally somebody was being a little like real with
blunt,
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, I feel like there's something going on. And like, I could see there's something going on here. And like, I kind of, for the first time, I think really opened up to somebody and trusted and like just broke down about like what was actually going on with my life. And, I still couldn't acknowledge that I had an eating disorder, but I was like, something's wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Something's wrong, you know? I was like, something's wrong.
The hint of, gotcha.
Yeah. It was like the tip where I was like, something's wrong. I think I have a problem with my relationship with food and I'm really scared of eating certain things. And I started to piece it together.
Yeah.
And he encouraged me to go to therapy. And I'd gone to therapy before that, but I never really met the right therapist.
That's huge. Oh my God.
Huge. And my previous therapists were never able to really help me with the eating issues. Like I would bring it up, but they kind of ignored it. Or like, I think they just didn't know how to handle it. So they just didn't really address it.
Isn't that the truth? Like if it's not their, if they don't specialize in it, if they don't have all the info, then they just kind of glaze over, and that's not... That's not all right.
Yeah, that was it. It was just kind of like, we're sweeping that under.
Right.
Like, okay, have you tried this? Like, have you tried just picking something off the menu when you go to eat? Or, it was just like these terrible suggestions that wasn't actually addressing what the problem was.
Interesting. Were people like more focused on the mom death situation than eating?
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that too, where it's like, I think, looking back on it now, it's like, no, I think the eating disorder needed to be treated first. Like,
Correct.
That's the thing that I couldn't see clearly. My reality, every thought that I had was viewed through that eating disorder lens, and without removing that, I can't see anything clearly.
You can't even get to the trauma.
Yes, yeah.
And that's what DBT is for, is to really address those immediate issues. And even with like substance abuse and things that I'm learning in school now, it's like when you're creating a treatment plan for a client, you have to go in order of like what you think is the most urgent. And, in cases of like eating disorders or like alcoholism or substance abuse, whatever it is, you have to start there because and you have to meet the client where they are. If the person's not ready to change and is not ready to even acknowledge that they have an eating disorder, it's going to be difficult to even talk about that stuff. So you have to start where they are and then work from there and then work down into the trauma, because I don't think anyone's going to come into a room, with a new therapist and suddenly be like, this is what I'm feeling and this is how horrible my life is. And let me just tell you the worst things that have ever happened to me. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So
how did so you found this therapist that you actually liked?
I found a therapist who was very different. Yeah. And I was honestly really skeptical, but at the same time, I was like, what do I have to lose at this point?
Were you skeptical just because of your previous therapy experience? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And she was kind of a newer therapist too. Yeah. So I was like, well, what's she gonna know?
Newbie.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's she gonna know?
Tricks on me. I'm the guinea pig.
Exactly. And I just thought, what? I'll go in for one session. Yeah. What's the worst that could happen? And she was actually so different from anyone that I'd ever worked with. And I really appreciated that she kind of self-disclosed and talked to me a little bit about like what she had gone through. And that's a controversial topic, I guess, in the like counseling world. I have a lot of professors who really advise against that, or, it
makes a world of difference.
I know. They tell you to be really careful with that. Mm-hmm. But I think, especially with, eating disorders and that population, in order to gain somebody's trust, at least for me, I needed to know what they had gone through and if they had any experience with this. And although my therapist didn't have, a full-blown eating disorder, she had experienced disordered eating and was very aware of, just living in this city, living in LA, and like what it's like and the pressures of feeling thin. And she also being thin. And she also specialized in trauma as well. So she knew that there was something under there, and she knew that I lost my mom, but she didn't directly like jump at that topic and like start talking about that first. Which I also appreciated. We really started addressing like more of the eating stuff and the eating disorder issues, and then slowly got down to like the grief and the trauma. And I'm still really working through all that. Because it is something that I think is just with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
To a certain extent, losing somebody, especially losing a parent. Yeah. And I know you feel differently about this, but I think it's like, I think it's like, no matter what, it's a huge part of your childhood and your life. And, it's very difficult to lose somebody who is such a huge piece of your life and to an extent like who you are.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And not having them be there for future events that will be important to you. I think that's also really difficult to come to terms with.
Yeah. My mom would have ruined my wedding day. Whenever it happens, that would have been horrible.
Yeah.
But no, I totally, every holiday I still miss her a lot. And even though it was a very unique type of mother-daughter relationship, of course, I get the longing and the yearning and the I want my mommy feeling.
Sure.
I think it's totally natural. So in your recovery then, was there like a turning point? Was there something that just clicked at a certain point, or was it just was there not really a defining like moment where you thought, okay, I'm now getting better, or was it just sort of a more natural, organic, like slow process?
I think that's an interesting question. For me, it was like yes and no. I do remember having one moment specifically where I was like so sick of myself, and I kind of finally was able to be like, you have a problem. Like binge eating like this is not normal. Putting your body through this kind of pain, waking up at 5 a.m. to work out, like this cannot be how you're going to live the rest of your life.
Right.
And I think on some level, I kind of accepted that like I was just like this damaged person that couldn't be helped, and was just like feeling so sorry for myself. And I came across a book called Brain Over Binge, which really was the beginning of my recovery. I think reading that book, even though I wasn't quite ready to change yet, reading that book really helped me understand what was going on with me and my body and why I was binge eating and the restriction that lied behind it. I finally was able to understand that.
And you've read Intuitive Eating as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, that was the one that was a real turning point for me, where it was like the first time that I realized that the way that I was doing things was totally abnormal. Like I had a sense that just from seeing people who were normal eaters, I knew that something was off, but reading Intuitive Eating, I was like, oh, so it's literally you eat 3 meals a day and a couple snacks, and it's when you're hungry and you're kind of on a schedule and you've got your routine and you stop when you're full and keep eating if you're hungry. Like, what a concept. But
it's so really funny. Yeah. It's like when people ask me too, I'm like, well, it's just eating intuitively. It's like in the name. You just trust your body and reject diet culture and diet mentality and reject, any of these rules and limitations and food rules and things that you have around food, and you just eat what sounds good to you. You eat when you're hungry. You eat, you're when you're done, you're done, and accepting that sometimes like you might not be physically hungry, but you're going to eat anyways because it's like a mental thing or social or, food is comforting. It just is what it is. And like, what a concept that like you just eat and your body tells you what it needs, and you don't need to restrict or create any rules or like intervene in that process.
Yeah.
It's like I almost compare it to the way that children eat. It's like if you look at how children eat, it's so intuitively, I'm hungry. I want this. Okay, now I'm full. Now I'm,
does
they
it sound
just
good
move
to you?
on.
No.
Yeah.
Does it? Yes, I want the chicken strips, whatever.
Exactly. Like, that's it. Like, what sounds good to you? Okay, like, that's it. That's literally it. There's no other
emotional connection.
Right. Like, I just ate 20 minutes ago, or like, I just had fats 5 minutes ago. I can't have another avocado. I can't have another. Like these stupid food rules that we make up that when you actually say them out loud sound completely ridiculous. Like, I don't know about you, but I had some crazy food rules that were so absurd.
Oh my God. Same.
I can't even tell you. Like, but it ruled my life. Like, that was my world. That was my life. That's what kept me safe.
Yeah, for sure has some, like, these deep-rooted emotional ties. It's like...
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. Is like, you think that they're keeping you on track and keep giving you that control. And it's funny because with eating disorders, like, you feel like you're so in control when in reality you are so...
fucking mess. Oh, my God.
So out of control.
Do you think control is a factor for almost everybody? I get it's a generalization, but...
I think it's... yes and no. I think yes. I also think that like people who start out with a diet, it can often turn into so much more than a diet and become an eating disorder. But I think people who really like perfectionism and people who really, see things kind of black and white or are very extreme
thinkers.
Yeah. Which is how I would probably describe myself and is something that I'm trying to work on. But I think those types of people are often people who do struggle with eating disorders.
How instrumental do you think having a partner who was supportive at the time, at that very sensitive early time in your recovery, how instrumental do you think that was?
I think it made a huge difference. I think one of the reasons why it made a huge difference wasn't because he understood eating disorders, because
right.
Trust me, he's learned so much from listening to me. I think it was more so because he was such a wonderful example of what normal eating looks like.
Yeah.
And he really had no restrictions around food and just ate so intuitively without even knowing it, without even trying. And I think just having that example was so helpful, and having somebody who just supported me going to therapy and taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And just encouraging that self-growth was really valuable.
I super relate. And I met my boyfriend pretty early on in my recovery, probably less than a year into my recovery. Was still obviously super sensitive territory for me, but seeing him be a normal eater and being able to talk openly about my eating disorder in a way that I hadn't talked about it before was huge. And I think I have some guilt around that at times too, of thinking just like, what about the people who don't fucking have somebody, who are just like white knuckling it? And I think that connection, that support, that emotional support is so helpful. But it concerns me about people who don't have that. And I just think I do think it's a much more difficult path.
It's really hard. And I honestly don't really have any friends who have had an eating disorder and have recovered.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we connect on such a level. But that's why I turned to YouTube, and that's why I turned to Instagram. And I know Instagram can be really harming in certain ways, but I did find such an incredible community. And like, you can choose to follow what you want to follow in like the recovery community. And like, there is a huge recovery community on YouTube and on Instagram. If you find it, you can tap into it. And if you find that it does encourage you and help you, which for me it did.
Yeah. But you think Instagram's more harmful than YouTube, would you say?
Harmful than, it could be. I mean, but I think it's also up to the user to take responsibility for like who they're following and the type of content you're consuming.
Oh my God, amen. Don't post a comment on somebody's thing being like, this is bad. Just don't follow them.
Exactly.
Stop.
Yeah. So, but I get what you mean. I mean, I think with like younger users who like maybe can't differentiate or like don't understand
the nuance to
I think that could be a little challenging. And I really have no problem even saying with people that I even know that I follow on Instagram who might post something that is like, very diet culture related or like something that is just a little disturbing or I don't like, that has to do with weight or food. I'll either mute them or I will unfollow them. And I really don't mind having a conversation with them and telling them like, this is a little triggering for me. Sorry, I just don't really want to see this on my feed or whatever it is. But obviously now you can mute people, which is great. But, if it's someone you don't know, like I highly encourage anyone to just unfollow. You don't need that. You don't need that in your life.
I'm so excited the word triggering is coming up, because I feel like trigger warnings are especially prevalent in the eating disorder community.
Yeah.
Like I feel a concern that I have about the community in general is how hypersensitive it is. And I think it's because I think we tend to be people who are extreme thinkers. I think we tend to be sensitive for whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it depends on the day, right?
Totally.
Generally pretty empathetic people, compassionate people.
Yeah.
We're great.
Yeah.
But I think that there's also this thing of like of being able to take accountability for the people that you follow and for the information that you're digesting No pun intended. I'm so sorry. and to be able to differentiate for yourself, find out what works for you. And also, this is very long-winded, but what I'm trying to say is that I think that the community's too sensitive. I really believe that. And I struggle with it because I want to respect everybody's process and where they're at in their process.
Yeah.
And acknowledge that everybody's at a different place and that they have a different history and that, that it might be much more difficult for some people than others to hear even the word food might, send somebody convulsing. You don't know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we've got to be able to talk about this stuff. And and the people who are struggling have got to be able to hear it in order to get better. Like, right? I mean, guide me, tell me where you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I agree. And I get where you're coming from. I think in the earlier stages of recovery, that might be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
But I think in the book that I read, Brain Over Binge, the author actually talks about how she would go, conventional therapy didn't work for her. She was bulimic and she struggled with binge eating disorder for 6 years, and just regular therapy was not working for her. And the reason being because therapists were telling her, like, okay, write down everything that's triggering to you. And she wrote that everything was triggering to her. Going to dinner with her family was triggering. Going to the grocery store was triggering. Staying at home alone was triggering. Like, all of these things were suddenly triggering to her. And she started to realize, like, that's not the problem. It's not the triggers. It's the urge to binge. And the urge to binge comes from the restriction. And she kind of put this all together. And, I think this was before DBT became so popular, but essentially she talks about, like, being more mindful of when she's restricting, knowing that that's going to lead to a binge, and being able to just stop all of that, and then really dealing with the urges that she was getting to binge eat. Even when she was eating normally, she saw that she was still having that urge to binge and was triggered, quote unquote, to continue binge eating. And that's when she realized, okay, like, I need to address the urges now that I'm getting for that, because that's a separate issue. So I think to where I was trying to go with this is that, like, everything can be triggering. Life is triggering.
Yes. Yeah.
So I do understand your point. I guess it really does depend on the person. And I don't know. I try not to use that word, to be honest.
Triggering.
Yeah.
Or triggered.
Like, I'll say it sometimes, but I don't like to use it very often, or, like, I would never be able to be like, oh, these are my triggers.
Right.
I don't like that kind of language. I think it's a little stigmatizing.
Okay. Gotcha.
And because of what you're saying, it becomes this topic that's like, oh my God, it's so sensitive that we just can't even talk about it.
Yeah. And now the word triggers become a joke where everybody who says it is like, I'm triggered. And it's like, okay, guys, can we talk about it from a legitimate place, though? And we've got it. Yeah. The thing is, too, I think, like, to the sensitivity thing, it's like people are dying of cancer. And do you think it's not triggering for them, really, to see people enjoying their birthdays and knowing, like, well, I might not see my next one? And but they're doing it. They're getting through it, And I just hope that the eating disorder community can encourage each other and support each other to talk about these things in an open way that maybe leads to more kind of self-discovery than, oh, I can't hear this, so I'm not going to deal with it or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know why we struggle, I think. And this, I think, happens in a lot of communities, not just the eating disorder community. But I feel like sometimes there's a struggle to really, like, support and encourage each other. And it's more of, like...
Explain,
it's a lot of, like, comparison. And it's like, oh, they're here in their recovery, or their body looks like this in recovery, and mine doesn't. Or, like... like we said earlier, somebody gains a certain amount of weight during recovery and somebody else gains, double the amount of weight.
Right.
And it's, like, always this comparison, and that doesn't, or even comparing yourself to your past self.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure.
that's a huge thing.
How was I there then?
Yeah. So I think that really distracts us from being able to be more supportive and just be able to talk about, like, more of the here and now and, like, what's going on, and being able to talk about being able to encourage others to share their stories. And again, I think there's so much stigma around eating disorders and misconceptions and myths that it is difficult to voice your opinion, especially if you're the only person in the room, which sometimes in a lot of my classes I am.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, go ahead.
So other people they don't understand what do they ask questions that even, sometimes people ask questions like, this is just too far off. We're not even going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Do some of them ask questions that you're like, okay, I think their understanding will get to a good place? Or do they just ask completely discouraging questions that make you feel hopeless and misunderstood?
It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get comments of like, I'll talk about diet culture. This happened last week. I talked about diet culture in class, and a student was like, oh, but I have a friend on the keto diet, and he does not have any cravings. He's lost a significant amount of weight. He's doing great. Like, the restriction's working great for him. No problem, And I just didn't have it in me to respond to something like that after I had gone off and talked about diet culture and like the harm that it does and restriction.
Yeah, what are you going to do at that point?
I was just, all
right,
I just kind of
enjoy
leave
the
that.
keto.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me this. Where do you think you're at in your recovery? Do you consider yourself in recovery, recovered?
That's a great question. And I actually wrote a post about this a while back because I didn't know how I felt about this myself. So I kind of opened it up to see like how other people felt.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think there's kind of two ways of looking at it. Some people think, you know what, you will always have to work towards recovery for the rest of your life. And like you can be 99.9% recovered, but you always have to make sure that you are not falling into a diet or restriction or whatever it is. And it's kind of something you have to maintain forever. And you're always going to have this like demon or this like roadblock. And then there are people who say, no, like you can be fully recovered and live a completely normal life and not think about food ever and ever have a problem again.
So that's what normal, is that how you would define normal then? It's just like, okay, it's not really on my mind. It doesn't really come up.
I think it's all on a spectrum and it's all relative. I think I describe normal, like having a normal relationship with food as somebody who like doesn't see food as, a moral issue. It's not good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. It's not something that's all consuming. It's not impairing their daily function. It's not something they're obsessing over. They can kind of eat intuitively, they eat intuitively. And it just is, it is part of their life. Of course, food is part of our lives. It's something we use to celebrate and, we enjoy it, but it's not impairing the way that we're functioning.
Right.
That's, I guess, how I would describe normal. And I don't know where I am in recovery. I guess I would consider myself recovered. I think I'm hesitant to say that only because I still have bad days and I still have days where I really don't like my body and I feel big and I feel like I've gained so much weight and like I don't feel great and I have those bad days. But I think the difference is now that even when I have those bad days, I take care of myself and I still eat what I want to eat. I don't restrict what I'm eating and I don't change anything. I kind of just acknowledge that I have those feelings and I sit with them and I accept them. Whereas before there would be a behavior that would follow that. And I'd be like, oh shit, I have gained weight. I'm I need to start like the next diet. Okay, tomorrow, like restriction, no sugars, no this, no, and I don't do that anymore. And I've realized that even when I have those bad days, I wake up the next day and I'm generally fine. And bad days, I mean, like, I have those, like, negative thoughts about myself. Sure. Not, like, bad days where I have, like, I change my behavior.
Relapse or something.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Like, I'll have some... the thing is, I think some of that is normal. No one's supposed to feel 100...
You're saying relapsing or you're saying negative thoughts?
Negative thoughts.
Gotcha.
Not relapsing. Yeah. I think to a certain degree, like...
For sure.
Everyone has a bad day. Yeah. Everyone feels shitty about themselves.
Right. It's why I think it's scary that there's also such a body positivity, body acceptance movement, or... I should say body positivity. I think body acceptance is a great thing. Yeah. That means accepting when you got some negative thoughts about it. When you're like, I'm the hottest shit that's ever lived. Like, on both sides of the spectrum, right? And I think that those fluctuations are totally normal. And I wish that was also talked about more because I don't think that loving your body, I don't think that accepting your body means loving your body every day.
Totally. Totally. And that's why I think more people are leaning towards body neutrality, which is a different movement. It's When
did this one start?
There's
so many of them. What's going on?
Yeah, I don't even know. But body neutrality is more of like, be thankful for what your body does and not necessarily what it looks like. And just feeling like no emotional charge really about your body. It's not negative. It's not positive.
I really like that. I like that.
And I remember even reading a post that somebody wrote about it where it was like, the days that I don't think about my body are like the best days that I have because like I just like don't focus on like what it looks like or examine it in the morning or like do any, it just kind of, and I also don't put this pressure on myself where it's like, I have to feel good about my body. I have to love my body. Look how far I've come. No, like that's hard. That's an expectation that's very difficult to meet, to wake up every day and be like, damn, you look amazing. Like, that's just like, you don't do that every day.
Yeah.
So I think some days you do and some days you should. Like, you should be confident. You should have those feelings. That's all great. I love that.
All for that, yeah.
I'm all for that. But I also think there are days when you don't feel good and you feel shitty. And like, I think body neutrality really kind of connects the two where it's like, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not going to take care of my body any differently today just because I'm not feeling it. I'm not,
Yeah. Are you a vegetarian, vegan, anything like that?
I am vegan.
Okay.
Yes.
Can we talk about this?
Yeah.
Or have you always been vegan?
No.
This is how long has this been?
I've been vegan for like 4 or 5 years now. Okay. So I have a really interesting story with veganism.
Tell me.
Veganism, I almost attribute to my recovery. And I want to make this clear. I do not believe that this is correct for everyone.
Okay.
I think that veganism is something that can easily be another eating disorder.
Right. That's what I want to get into.
We can go there.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked. And I've made videos about this too because I feel very conflicted because I want to share recovery content more than anything.
Yeah.
And I also feel very passionate about being vegan and I want to support that community.
Yeah,
but I do not want to support restriction or using veganism, as a way to mask an eating disorder. That is not at all what I'm supporting. And I think it really lies in your intentions behind being vegan or vegetarian or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, I stopped eating meat when I was a child. Like I hated it, never liked it. It was not for me.
Yeah.
So I was pretty much vegetarian my whole life. And up to the point where, when I was like in that bodybuilding stage and phase or whatever you want to call it, I would eat, I don't know what to call it.
Just the old bodybuilding
stage. The old bro diet. I was eating a lot of fish and eggs.
Yeah.
But mostly vegan. It was mostly vegan and then fish and eggs because, the dietitian I was working with was like, oh, you got to get your protein. And, it's like, all right, like, I guess I'll eat those two things. But I ate those literally, like I ate fish and eggs for like every single meal because that was the only protein I was getting.
Right.
And I became disgusted and sickened.
You're just like I can't do this anymore.
Of that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I was really attracted to the vegan community because I started having, I guess I didn't really talk about the like medical issues I was having because of my eating disorder. I was having a lot of problems with my digestion, which I know a lot of people do. Huge problems with my digestion. I had a lot of problems with my energy. Hormones was a big problem.
Yeah.
Even my menstrual cycle was like a huge problem.
Yep.
It caused a lot of physical problems and damage. And I ruined my thyroid. I'm now on medication for thyroid.
Yeah.
So it really messed up a lot of things for me. And I basically got to the point where I was pretty much eating the same thing every single day for years. And it got to a point where I was so uncomfortable and I was in so much pain physically from eating the same foods every single day.
Yeah.
And my body just lost the digestive enzymes to be able to I couldn't consume other foods because my body couldn't digest them because it didn't know how anymore.
Oh my God.
And it was extremely painful.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. And because you also don't have like a diverse gut microbiome.
Yeah.
When you don't eat a variety of different foods.
Yeah.
And So that became a huge problem for me. And I remember looking up, I was to the point where like I was not able to go to school. Like it was painful to eat. It was just painful to eat.
Yeah.
And I kind of like was giving up on hope. Like I didn't know what to do with myself. And I was researching, and a lot of people were like, just try a really carb-rich, like, whole foods, plant-based diet and see what happens. I did that for 48 hours and I instantly felt better.
Wow.
And
that fast. Wow.
That fast.
Wow.
And I just kept going because I was feeling better. And that was all that I cared about.
Your body was just kind of driving. Yeah.
And I think what attracted me, there's a lot to say about the vegan community, especially on YouTube. But what was...
I know?
I will get there. But
yeah.
What attracted me to veganism was the idea of abundance and, don't track your calories. We don't care about macronutrients, any of that. You just eat, and you eat a lot of food because plant-based foods are not as calorically dense as like animal foods and animal products.
Sure.
So being able to see all of this food on my plate was so attractive to me.
Yeah.
And like I was eating foods that I was never allowing myself to eat before, like, brown rice, bread, sweet potatoes, beans, all these things that were just such no-nos for me.
Yeah.
Pasta, like...
Which can be calorie dense, those,
Definitely, definitely. And I started going through extreme hunger, which is part of recovery, and being able to kind of heal myself with the vegan diet. And I, of course, like ate things that weren't, clean, cookies, whatever. I just found that it helped with my digestion the best. And of course, like being diagnosed with the thyroid condition that I have and all those kind of aspects really helped. But I became so attracted to this community. And like I said, I had a history of never enjoying meat anyways.
Yeah.
I think it would be a different story if I enjoyed the taste and was like, oh yeah, no.
If you had feelings for meat based on the sound you just made.
Yeah. No. So I think I have a unique kind of scenario and that my intentions really were like, I remember telling myself, okay, you can do this, but if you feel like you want to eat something different that's not vegan, that's all,
it's great.
It's
so
all
you're
good.
Just like, okay, as long as this works for me, and if it doesn't, so be it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my intentions were just to like heal my body. And like I said, I was eating abundantly and eating all these different types of foods that I never ate before.
Yeah.
So it was really exciting. And it was something that I found extremely helpful. And I also was not trying to use it to restrict. I wanted to get better at this point. I wanted to get healthier.
Yeah.
So I, and I did talk about it with my therapist, and she supported it and was like, okay, like as long as your intentions are, not in the wrong place, then
back to the intentions, making sure that that's,
you don't want to. Exactly. That's when I realized like, okay, like I want to do this. I like doing this. And if I ever feel like I don't want to do this or I want to eat something else, like that's okay too, because my goal was to be recovered. And I think as I just became like more and more, like the more I learned about veganism and the lifestyle and the community, the more I really like loved it and felt like a sense of belonging, which is something I think I never really felt before. So that kind of was healing to me.
Wow. What do you think about people who, because I, especially in the beginning of my recovery, was on YouTube constantly watching so many recovery videos and trying to, I think still just trying to find guidance and guidelines for how do I heal? Where do I land? Do I want to be vegan? Do I want to be vegetarian? What am I going to wind up doing here? And for me at the time, like I feel very confident in my relationship with food now, that if I make a choice about being a vegetarian or being vegan, that will come from the right intentions. At the time, I think I was still too early in my recovery to be able to make that call myself. And I noticed that a lot of, because I really debated, I was like, should I go vegan? Let me go vegan. And I was attracted to it.
Yeah.
But I think I just didn't trust myself enough that I was doing it for the right reasons, that I wanted to do it for the right reasons. And I felt like a lot of people who were recovering from eating disorders that I was watching the videos of were doing it, or it seemed to me like they were showing these vegan what I eat in a days and things from a place of still trying to subconsciously track and still trying to, and it's just that gut feeling. Like it was just a feeling of, oh, I think that it's not the pure intention. Do you think that's a thing where a lot of people turn to, and why are people turning to veganism?
Yeah.
Is it?
I think it is attractive because it's, for somebody who comes from, and maybe this is another reason why I was attracted to it, but thankfully it didn't turn into another eating disorder for me. I think what's so attractive about veganism and that lifestyle is that it is something that is food related. So if you're looking to recover, you're like, okay, well, this maybe is the next step for me because it feels safe and comfortable. Mm-hmm. I think that's why. Mm-hmm. And
because there's still
some sort of a restriction.
Right.
I don't see it as a restriction, but I'm coming from a place of somebody who is recovered and somebody who was not using it to restrict. And again, like I never said like, okay, I'm only going to eat vegan from now on. I was like, no, this is making me feel good. And if I feel like I want to have eggs or something else, then I will. Yeah. And like meat and dairy wasn't part of my vocabulary for like years before that. So I think the vegan community on YouTube I struggle with because there are so many ex-vegans now who have come out after promoting veganism.
Yeah, I see a lot of these on my recommended page.
There are these crazy videos of all these ex-vegans, and if you look at all these people, I'm not going to name names here, but these YouTubers were promoting water fasting, were promoting like raw veganism, we're promoting some sort of crazy extreme restriction that is impossible to maintain. And if you ask me, I think they had a responsibility to tell their subscribers, because these are huge YouTubers. I'm talking about people with like millions of subscribers or, a big following, 500,000 subscribers, whatever. These people are talking to an audience about, how this lifestyle is so great and wonderful when they're actually like starving themselves or restricting themselves in some sort of way. And I think they have a responsibility to come out and say, you know what, this was an eating disorder. Nobody's talking about that. They're just like, the vegan diet failed me and da-da-da-da. Listen, like, I get it. Veganism's not for everybody. It's okay if you, don't want to be vegan anymore. That's not what I'm having a problem with here. I'm having a problem with the responsibility of being like, what? I had an eating disorder.
Take accountability.
Why don't you say that, Like, why are you not saying that in your ex-vegan videos? It's always just like, the vegan diet failed me. And it's like, maybe it did, but maybe it didn't. And maybe you just had an eating disorder and you were trying to mask it with veganism. And you can't run that long. Like, how long are you going to hide it under veganism? Because raw veganism, water fasting, like starvation of any kind, restriction like that is, I become really skeptical of that kind of stuff. I find that the most successful vegans are vegans who eat anything just as long as it's vegan. And that's what I try to say.
I like the word abundance too. Just thinking of an abundance mindset of like, as much as you want, when you want.
Totally. And I do this because this is what makes me and my body feel good. If it didn't, I probably wouldn't, Yeah. It's just personal. It's something that I think works for me and my body. And of course, like being part of a community, I think is special. And I love that. And, there's a whole ethical aspect to it as well. But just purely talking about it from this lens and like health and eating disorders, I think it can be very difficult for people to navigate. And I know a lot of people in the recovery community do not promote veganism and don't promote vegetarianism. And like a lot of recovery centers, inpatient treatment centers, I know do not allow patients to be vegan.
Right.
And that is hard.
It's hard if you don't fucking like meat. You're like,
And what if you're, you've been an ethical vegan your entire life, before you had an eating disorder. Like, I kind of have an issue with that too. I don't think it's fair to force somebody to eat meat and say like, that's recovery. That could be really traumatic and damaging.
About, killing an animal.
So,
you're recovered.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a really tough topic. And again, thank you for asking about it, because I think we do need to talk about it. And I don't have all the answers and I don't know what's right. And all I can say is, my own personal experience and my intentions are in a good place. And I think that that is probably the most important thing when it comes to veganism. And
Yes.
you know, even if you're like gluten-free, like, are you doing it because you actually have celiac? Are you doing it, you know, it's more of like a gentle nutrition approach. Like, you're not going to put foods into your body that makes you feel physically sick. Like, that's not intuitive eating. And that's in intuitive eating. You know, they talk about that. It's like gentle nutrition, just being kind to yourself and understanding what foods make your body feel good.
That's it. Jen, it makes me think of how there are a lot of nutritionists out there also, like, talk about the fucking dark side of recovery. A lot of nutritionists have fucking eating disorders.
Yeah.
Like, they're again, when I was in the early stages and I was like, okay, maybe I'll be vegan, then I would try like meal plans. Oh, I'll just do meal plans because then I at least won't purge and I know that I'll keep it down, whatever. And then I saw like several nutritionists, and every single one I was like, I don't think they're telling me what an eating disorder therapist, I don't think they're telling me things that an eating disorder therapist would approve, you know?
Yeah. I think if you are out there and you're looking for a dietitian when you have an eating disorder, I think it's really important to look for certain criteria, I guess I would say. I would want somebody, or I would recommend somebody who understands diet culture, understands health at every size, understands how triggering, how damaging it can be for somebody to suggest like a certain type of diet or anything that has to do with like restriction or even counting. I think, you know, I didn't do this.
Yeah.
So I can only speak from what I've heard from other people. But I find it to be really difficult when people talk about, you know, how they're in recovery and their dietitians are having them like count certain things or like, you know, like, what's up with that?
That's so dangerous.
That's so dangerous.
What a slippery slope.
But it's like they have to make sure that they're eating a certain amount of calorie. You know, it's like, oh, make sure that you're getting at least 3,000 calories
so
or like to meet a certain
a number as opposed to
like
decrease.
Be under the number. It's like they set a goal of like make sure you're eating 3,000 calories. There's actually a type of recovery that was pretty popular. I don't know if it still is, called mini mod.
I don't know.
Heard of it?
No, I don't know.
It's based off of the Minnesota starvation experiment, and
that sounds all kinds of bad.
Just listening to that, basically it was a starvation experiment where they kind of were able to measure. I think it was
starve everybody in Minnesota.
It was not everyone in Minnesota.
No one survived,
but most people dropped out of it. It was an experiment. I think it was done in the 70s, and I need to check the facts on this one.
Yeah,
but basically people were starved and like their calorie, I think they were set into two different groups maybe, and people, there was a certain group whose calories were decreased throughout time and like how they started thinking about food
like
more,
little by little.
And it was supposed to like replicate a diet basically. And anyways, there was a certain recovery model that was based off of that experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And the recovery model states like you should be eating, I think, 3,500 calories, I want to say, every single day for a certain amount of time to recover. Mm-hmm. And so then you have people who are trying to like track their calories, making sure that they're meeting the 3,500 mark or whatever their threshold is. And that's problematic because you're still having to count your calories to make sure that you're hitting that mark.
Still potentially obsessing, still feeding. Yeah.
And I've heard certain dietitians do that as well. And I think that's kind of like, I don't know, we're kind of missing the mark here. Like, why are we doing that when, you know, I think that still promotes obsessive behavior. That's why I have a problem with it.
This is kind of a weird question, but in your recovery, did you find that your style changed, that the clothing that you liked changed?
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. This is such a good question.
Right? It changes so fucking much.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's still fucking changing. Let me tell you. Before, when I was in my eating disorder, I really, really was insecure about being stylish and about like the types of stuff that I was wearing. Mm-hmm. I'd only wear leggings. And in my recovery too, I remember crying because I was trying to go out on a date with Alex, now my husband, then my boyfriend. We would go on these like cute dates and like, you know, he wanted to go to something where I couldn't wear leggings, and I didn't have any pants that fit me in recovery. And I had still saved all the jeans that I used to wear when I was in a smaller body, and none of those fit me. And I don't know why I still held on to that, but I did. And I tried to put them on, and it was such a reminder of how much weight I had gained and how painful that was for me. And I just remember calling him and being like, I can't meet up, da-da-da-da-da. Like, I don't have anything to wear. And he was just like, what? It's really hard. It's so hard. But yeah, I think, in my eating disorder, I was really kind of ashamed of my body, and I wanted to cover it up. And when I did feel good and when I did feel thin, I was trying to wear like the skimpiest things because I wanted to show up how thin I was.
Oh my God.
And then in recovery, it was the total opposite. I was just like leggings, long t-shirt. I just didn't really want to be seen. Yeah. And I would also straighten my hair all the time, stick straighten my hair, like I was just like doing all of these things, getting my nails done all the time, like doing all these things to like upkeep and keep up with like this appearance. And more recently, and by the way, I've also worked in retail basically since high school, since college, basically. Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah. So 10 years. I've been working in retail for almost 10 years while I've been in school. It's been helping me out here. And I just was like not into it. And it's not until like more recently, the past couple of years, that I've been like, really, my style's evolving so much.
Every time I see you, you look so cute.
Thank you. Yeah. But this is a new thing for me.
Isn't it fucking weird?
It's so fun.
Yeah.
It's crazy because I have never been so excited about like fashion and trying things on and changing my style and wearing my hair naturally curly, not wearing nail polish anymore. Like just really being more like barely wearing makeup, just being more in tune with who I am and like naturally like feeling accepted by myself.
What you gravitate toward. I feel like my relationship with clothing and my sense of style completely transformed because, I mean, the pendulum swung to the opposite side because whenever an eating disorder was in my life, I was wearing clothing to cover up an insecurity. It was another thing that was just like this. I had a fucked up relationship with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. There's more clothing rules. Oh, if I'm this weight, then I can wear this thing. And if I'm that weight, then I have to wear that thing. And it has to be all black. And then I can do this, and maybe if I wear that, then it's like such a headache.
Exhausting.
And now it's just it's so tiring.
Yeah,
leaving the house is a journey.
Yeah,
no less. But now it's just like, oh, I like this. Oh, maybe I'll try this. Oh, this seems fun, and it's fun. I never knew that clothing could be fun when people talked about it like that.
Totally.
I thought, oh, that's insanity. That
sounds like a headache.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the headache that I had trying to wedge myself into whatever pair of jeans or skirt that day was like insane.
Yeah. And it's like the rules that society has too, where it's like, don't wear a crop top if you have a stomach or don't da-da-da or what, don't wear skinny jeans if you're, hourglass or what. Like, I don't know, all these like bullshit, stupid fucking rules. And now I'm just like, I like it. I think it looks good. This makes me feel good.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to food where it's like, now I just dress intuitively. Like, what do I feel like today?
Yay!
What is going to make me feel confident,
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. And
did you just coin the term dressing intuitively?
I think I did.
Think you did.
Intuitive dressing. You heard it here first, folks. Just saying. But I do that too. Also, like, I like to work out intuitively too. And that's something we haven't really talked about.
No, I want to talk about this because I haven't worked out in months and months.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, probably over a year. It's been a long time. And it was because I felt like every time I felt like that was the last lingering piece for me. So in recovery, I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to work out. And then I'd start working out and I'd be like, why did I run 12 miles today? Didn't need to do that. And then it'd be, I'm going to work out 7 days a week. And then I'd be upset if I didn't work out. And I thought, okay, well, this is still clearly a little bit of an issue for me. So I'm going to cool the jets on this. Is that the term? Cool the jets.
Cool the jets, baby. Yes.
So I cooled my jets for a while, and the jets are still cooling, and they have yet to warm up. But I had the thought the other day, I walked past a place called Pop Physique that I used to kind of go to a bit obsessively. And I was like, you know what? I think that I want to go for fun. I think that it just seems like a fun fucking thing to do and a nice way to spend an hour, listen to some jams and
totally.
Oh my God, cool my jets and listen to some jams.
Totally. I love it. I love it.
So yeah, talk me through what your relationship with working out is, where it's at now.
I think being somebody who was a personal trainer and who cared so much about working out, I really found so much relief in it. And, you know, I obviously used it as a way to manipulate, you know, what I was eating and to compensate and punish myself for a really long time. And similarly to your experience, like I also felt like I was using it in a way that wasn't healthy. And I had an unhealthy relationship with working out.
Yeah.
And it kind of took me a while to back away from that. And I did go through periods where I really didn't work out. And it was really interesting for me because I remember feeling so many things.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of deal with that and sit with that really uncomfortable feeling of not working out. And I sorted through that quite a bit. And now I do it because it feels good. And if I go to the gym and I don't feel like being there within the first 5 minutes, I'm out of there. I'll leave.
Can I ask what would come up when you weren't working out? And there's...
It would be a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and a lot of fear that my body was going to change. Knowing what I know about lifting, knowing what I know about just like how your muscles, you know, grow and this and that, and you can decrease muscle. And I think that was really scary, just being able to sit with that and the fear of like, my body might change. And if I let go of the way, you know, my restriction and like the way that I eat and let go of working out, like, what do I have left?
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, what do I do with all this?
It's so interesting to me coming from somebody who you are no longer a trainer, right?
No.
Okay. So from somebody who was a trainer and just to be an authority figure in that space and be talking about this kind of stuff, I feel like is so important. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you quit training in recovery, or what was the impetus of stopping?
I stopped because I realized I wanted to really help people who were struggling with eating disorders.
Yeah.
And I ultimately decided to go to grad school and get my master's. But I stopped because I didn't feel like it really aligned with my goals and values. And I didn't want to be promoting weight loss and fat loss and all these things. And throughout my time as a trainer, and I'm really proud to say this, I never, ever promoted diets or losing weight or, and I said that to all of my clients straight up. And I actually had a couple of clients who were struggling with eating disorders or had just come back from recovery. And, you know, they teach you, I worked for like a pretty like elite gym in LA.
Yeah.
They tell you to like put people on this like body composition scale where you find out their body fat, their muscle mass, their weight, and like it compares you to where you should be for your age and your height and your gender and all those things.
How fun.
Yeah, which was pretty, I mean, it's almost shameful to like do that and then to sit with somebody and like have them tell you what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that's how you're like supposed to sell training. And whatever, I get that, but that's never something that I did unless the client really like asked for something like that.
Yeah.
But even then, I wouldn't review it with them. I wouldn't go over it with them. It was just like, I didn't want to promote that. I wanted to promote working out intuitively, doing what felt good. And anytime I had a client come in, be like, listen, I'm not having a good day. I don't feel good. I'm like, okay, what sounds good to you? Like, let's just move and talk. Like,
yeah.
And there were many sessions where we would just go outside and walk and talk. And that was it. You know, I think my view was very untraditional. Some people, I guess, really like that kind of trainer that was, you know, hardcore and like, you know, boot camp style. And I certainly trained with people like that while I was there. And other trainers were like that. But that's just not what I was about and you know, it wasn't something that I was going to promote. So there were definitely occasions where I gave those clients to other trainers because that's wasn't who I was and wasn't something that I was going to promote.
We're almost out of time, but before we wrap up here, I just want to talk a little bit about just, I guess, offering some support for people out there who might be struggling. And I wanted to get your thoughts on some materials and resources that you can maybe refer them to.
I love Brain Over Binge.
Yep.
That's a wonderful one, which really helped me, and I did talk about in this podcast. There's also a podcast called Food Psych by Chrissy Harrison, who's a registered dietitian.
Yeah.
She talks a lot about, are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
From you had email, I asked you for,
She talks a lot about like breaking away from diet culture and creating a more peaceful relationship with food. And she talks about a lot of these issues. I actually learned about a lot of these things, thin privilege, all that good stuff from her.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend her. She's like the queen. And then on Instagram, there is somebody named Hey Tiffany Rowe, who's a wonderful advocate as well. She's a therapist in Utah, and she kind of talks about these issues and her own personal struggles with her eating disorder.
Yeah.
And
I'm excited to check her out.
I think wasn't there one more book I think maybe I had sent? I can't remember.
Yeah. We talked about intuitive eating here.
Intuitive eating is great.
One. Yeah.
I highly recommend that.
And if you think of anything else, too, we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
So
perfect.
Let us know.
I think those three are all wonderful.
A good place to start.
A really good place to start. And I would just check those out for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for hanging out and talking. I had so much fun.
I did too.